Hey, Plot Army! It's Jack Stansbury here. Slice is taking a break this week, so I'm gonna be filling in for him for this recap. Never fear, he'll be back with you for the next chapter. My Hero Academia has switched focuses once again with this chapter, getting back to Deku and his struggles against the all-powerful Shigaraki. And yes, I mean Shigaraki, and not All for One. Prior to this, we were following Ochaco and Tsuyu's fight to get Toga's attention away from the heroes and directed at them instead, with not much success. This time, not only do we get confirmation that the ever-frightening Tomura is currently in control, but that some lower-level villains are now on the hero's side. Without any further delay, let's get into it. Chapter 377, called All the Efforts Until Now, starts with a sakura tree in full bloom with text alongside it. According to the narration, the heroes are currently struggling to even get an opening, while the villains reign supreme. But like any war, we know that can change in an instant, which is the kind of thing a certain villain's appearance at the end offers us. And interestingly, cherry blossoms usually signify things like rebirth or the start of spring, something good to come. Hope. The cherry blossom tree also functions as a means to show what the tactic was for facing the large amount of villains All for One's side had amassed. By dividing them, the heroes meant to take each of the most troublesome villains down, like the wind blowing off leaves to be caught in your palm. But as we know, this failed in the end. Interestingly, the next panel shows a hand trying to grasp a floating petal, and it's slipping through their grasp. Could this be Shigaraki's attempt at seizing the heroes and failing? A foreshadowing for what's to come in the future? Or is it just telling us that his goals have shifted, and he's not as intent on destroying everyone like before? There's no time to dwell on that though, when we see UA's floating fortress and the appearance of warp gates nearby. If you recall, previously President Mike wasn't able to stop Spinner from awakening Kurogiri, and knew the consequences would be terrible. This image isn't new to us though. We had a hint of it in chapter 374, but it quickly shifted over to Dabi's scorched body going to greet Endeavor. So here we are again, with Mike screaming as he's pushed through the warp gate, and Aizawa calling out his real name in shock. He's still with Manuel and Monoma working together to keep Shigaraki in check, but with this incoming distraction, he knows that'll be harder to ensure now. With Kurogiri's ominous expression almost seeming to taunt the heroes, twice his doubles created by Toga start to fall through the portal. These clones have clearly come as a means for Kurogiri to fulfill his role as Shigaraki's protector by removing the obstacles keeping All for One's successor from unleashing his quirks. The doubles waste no time in reaching for the trio, as Manuel and Aizawa look on in horror with no means to defend themselves. Knowing that the real current threat is Monoma, since he's the one enabling the use of Erasure, they tackle him first, pinning him to the ground to break his connection with the two other heroes. His face is slammed harshly on the floor as he grimaces with pain. Could that even be some blood coming out of his nose? Before we continue with this intense shift in events, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on, and Detroit smash that like button for more MHA videos like this. The next panel features a haunting scream from someone whose face is entirely covered, and their body a shapeless mold of parts. In many ways, it looks like the old All for One when he had no facial features, and the lines around the midsection look like his rivet stab. It could even be a throwback to when Shigaraki's body was falling apart due to being incomplete in the previous war arc. What's more frightening is if it's Monoma, trapped under the sea of twice sludge clones, unable to break free or breathe. And that's how he ends up incapacitated. A massive explosion follows this downright chilling imagery, with UA's power system being knocked out by the attack. The staff working underground panic when they realize this, knowing they can't send parts to the surface with this development. Rushing around, trying to fix the situation, they call out to each other on the status of things, and it's not looking good. Not only is the electric barrier less than full strength, but the system that kept them afloat isn't working correctly anymore. It sounds like they might need a hand from Ochaco right about now. Mandalay sends that message telepathically, with Yaoyorozu utterly shocked at the information. Whether they like it or not, things are not going their way. In fact, they aren't in control anymore. And at that, we get the reveal of who's causing this problem. It's the B-rank villain, Skeptic. A man in a suit stands guard while the hacking villain works his magic to make the heroes' lives even more difficult. Acting like a typical antagonist, he announces, "Fall to your deaths, heroes!" With that, we get a view of the Twice clones now swarming the monitoring aisle like disgusting sludge creatures, and Mandalay conveying messages about Phantom Thief being possibly incapacitated. Deku is alerted immediately, even before she can spread the message of Erasure being nullified, that Shigaraki is back in the game. Or the war, rather. Wind swirls around, pushing Deku back and seeming to come off of Shigaraki's body. Mandalay shouts with worry that if they can't fix this, the strongest villain will escape. Looking worse for wear, Deku tries to understand how events have turned so sour, knowing that Kurogiri is to blame for this. As Mandalay continues her ominous speech about Japan and the entire world being in danger if Shigaraki gets away, we see scenes of where other heroes currently are and their struggles. But Deku can't think in those terms and squares up to face an unhindered Shigaraki. He thinks to himself that it's odd for the villain to be standing still and turning inside out, as if he's molting his skin like a lizard. Does this mean all the hands wrapping his face and body were due solely to All For One's control? Suddenly getting a view of Tomura's feet, he speaks in his all too familiar and informal way, using Ore to speak of himself. He demands to know why Deku asked if he was still there. This is a callback to when Deku arrived to help Mirio and the other heroes out, while seeing how changed and deformed Shigaraki looked. At the time, it just seemed like a means to cause turmoil within the combined villains, but it could definitely be Deku's hero senses telling him to help save the child Tomura hidden deep within. Regardless, when Shigaraki reveals his usual frightening face and grin, even talking about the mall where he held Izuku captive for a short while, it's hard to find anything good left within him. All Deku can think is how it's clearly the younger villain, and not All For One currently in charge of the body. But maybe he was also hoping it wasn't the corrupted version of Shigaraki coming to chat with him. All I know is, Tomura is not going to make it easy to save him, which is an interesting thought. We switch back to Skeptic and his fiendish computer plans to drop the survivors within the floating isle, nearly a dozen screens around him. It's revealed that he's hiding in some sort of cave deep in a forest of trees so the heroes can't stop the work he's doing. With a manic grin, he celebrates the fact that UA is under his control now, as well as the underground shelter. And just like any common villain, he's so certain that everything is his to manipulate or destroy now that he has the upper hand that he celebrates too quickly. There's even a panel of him simply laughing like a psychopath, which is very reminiscent of Joker in his laughing imagery. We get back to Deku though, overwhelmed with what he needs to do and who he needs to focus on, whether it be the falling people, keeping Shigaraki from leaving, or stopping Kurogiri from transporting his allies around. Even so, Deku can't block out the intrusive thought that if he doesn't do something, people like Momo and everyone else in her vicinity will die. There's just too much, and he's already reaching his limits due to Gear Shift and how powerful of a quirk it's become through being passed to him. Deku bends over, struggling for air as he reveals that it's necessary for him to let his cells recover or he won't be able to breathe. But the second user, whose quirk it belonged to, tells Deku he can't stop just yet because they still have more to do. On the other hand, the second user realizes that All For One no longer has as much control over Shigaraki and his body as he once did, and that it's becoming increasingly unstable. Beside him, Deku's not sure he understands what he means by this. The second user continues, explaining that both massive quirks, One For All and All For One, have resonated with each other, so they're more connected in some ways, even referring to it as seeing within each other's quirks. And because of that, the second user can tell how hard Shigaraki is making it for All For One to control him currently. A dark space seems to show light at the end of it, like a glowing light at the end of a tunnel, just as you think nothing can be made better. And the second user points out that Deku needs to keep moving since they're running out of time, but that his actions from the past are starting to show results now. They're just about to sprout, he says. And that's when we get the reintroduction of a cute little character, promptly shaking Skeptic out of his villain laughter and gloating behavior. This mystery lady says, "Found you," then admitting that it wasn't easy to track him down, but she's finally done it. Confused and no longer celebrating like he was, all Skeptic can say is, "Huh?" And that's when she's revealed to be La Brava, aka Gentle Criminal's partner who confronted Deku during the school's cultural festival, back when things were much simpler and involved fewer deaths. Behind her beaming face is Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi, looking surprised by how much she's enjoying this. And it's clear she would, as she considers she's doing this for Gentle's sake. Now, this could mean either their sentence will be lowered, seeing as they were a criminal duo, or because helping the heroes means allowing the world to eventually get back to some semblance of normal. Not all villains want total destruction of the world, right? But could this mean something else? Since her love power makes someone she cares for the most become more powerful, could this be a hint at Gentle Criminal's triumphant return as a kind of anti-hero? All we can say for sure is that the heroes need all the help they can get, so even having La Brava around is so very appreciated. And it's nice to see that she's labeled as a former villain too. With that said, we've reached the end of the chapter. This was a bit on the shorter side again, but who can blame Horikoshi when it's also holiday season? We'll definitely be getting back to longer ones soon, and you can be sure we'll be right there to cover it all. I'm Jack Stansbury, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day!